Good morning, buongiorno, bonjour, kalimera, good day. The Aussie didn't smile when I said good day. And welcome to our exchange. That was just for you. You may be the only Aussie in the audience, as a matter of fact. My name is Andreas Souvaliotis. Do not ever try to pronounce that again. I very, very proudly serve on the board of the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, and I am here today to introduce our first exchange of the day. And normally, all I would say is I'm introducing the exchange, and here is who is going to moderate it, and I would turn it right over to Sivan. But I just want to add one tiny little bit of spice. Having had the pleasure of knowing all of the participants that you're about to hear from, I want to give you my personal promise that you're about to be really inspired by 5 people who are creating real change in our world, in different corners of our world. So I truly hope you enjoy this, and it's my pleasure to introduce Sivan Paveltsian, pronounced almost perfect, Palvetsian. Now I did it perfectly, the CEO of Civic Action in Toronto, who is going to moderate this session. Please join me in welcoming Sivan to the stage.
Thank you. That was well pronounced. I'm going to give that to you, Andreas. Thank you so much. It is my great privilege to be here. As Andreas mentioned, I am the CEO of Civic Action, and we're a city-building organization that involves a lot of different conversations about a lot of topics that matter, and then diving into action to make them change. And so the opportunity to be here on the invitation of Charlie and David, and certainly thank you to Ms. Adrienne Clarkson and Mr. John Rostensaul for putting the vision into making an event like this happen. Our country needs more of this, and frankly, the world does as well. We're in Toronto, which is sometimes referred to by others as the center of the universe. And when they say that, they don't mean that with great affection. But this morning, we have earned that street cred. This really is the center of the universe because we have with us 5 speakers that come from every corner of the globe. They're going to share with you different perspectives of inclusion, or in some cases, lack thereof. I hope that you take it in, and the format that's going to enable that to happen is they're going to speak for about 5 minutes each. Then we're all going to come back up to the stage. I'm going to engage them in some Q&A, and then you get to hold the microphone and ask directly to these leaders questions that you have about their corners of the world and how they are tackling this challenge of inclusion. Up first, we have Daniel Webb. Stand up, Daniel. Come on up. Come on up. So Daniel joins us from Australia, and he is the Director of Legal Advocacy in the Human Rights Law Center. He's the founder of the center's Asylum Seeker and Refugee Rights Unit and also heads the center's advocacy at the United Nations Human Rights Council. He has a big job, but he surfs. He's from Australia. So he's going to share with you some of the journey that's happened there and some of how he has magically blended PR and legal work to a brilliant alchemy that's seeing real change in Australia. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited and feel very honoured and grateful to be here. I wish I came bearing better news. I want to talk to you a bit about exclusion in Australia right now. Exclusion in Australia is epitomised by the cruelty of successive Australian governments to refugees. So since 2013 in Australia, it has been bipartisan policy that any person who arrives on a boat and claims asylum is automatically deported and indefinitely imprisoned in one of 2 refugee detention camps that our government has built on remote islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Now, as a result of this policy of mandatory exile and indefinite detention, right now there are 1,600 innocent human beings who have been detained for 5 years with no end in sight, and 100 of them are children. And as you would expect, after 5 years growing up, surrounded by this suffering and misery, these kids are losing hope, and children as young as 10 tragically have tried to kill themselves. Now, in my work recently, we've been running cases in our federal court that seek the medical evacuation to Australia of some of these critically unwell children. And as I sat there in our federal court recently, watching our government fight tooth and nail to deny basic medical care to a suicidal child that they have imprisoned for 5 years, I couldn't help but ask myself, how on earth did we get here? How on earth did the policies that squeezed every last drop of hope out of this child come to be bipartisan even after 5 years? And the answer simply is politics. I mean, we're going to hear from some great political leaders later this morning, but sadly in Australia, on this issue, for the best part of 2 decades, our politics has been characterised by this sort of aggressive fear-mongering and cowardice on the other side. We've got one side of politics that figures it can win election after election by sort of beating up on refugees and increasingly other migrant communities. And we've got the other side of politics who are so anxious about their own election, so sort of preoccupied with the banalities of marginal seat opinion polls that they've lacked the moral gumption to push back in any meaningful way. And in that kind of sort of abhorrent bipartisanship climate, that climate of abhorrent bipartisanship, things spiral downwards very quickly. So what started as a bit of cruelty to refugees became mandatory and indefinite detention, became 5 years of misery and suffering, became children trying to take their own lives, and the policy still having bipartisan support. So that's the climate in which we're trying to achieve change right now, and it's fair to say we're starting from a long way behind, but a couple of things are working. One is litigation. Through cases, individual cases in our High Court, we have prevented 470 people from being deported to these offshore camps. 470, including 157 children. So, I mean, litigation has its limitations as a strategy. You can't sort of litigate away cruelty and replace it with kindness. But individual cases, thanks to these individual cases, more than half of the children subject to these policies are actually in freedom and safety in Australia right now. The other thing that's worked has been big advocacy campaigns focused squarely on the people who are subject to these policies. And it sounds simple, but we've run big advocacy campaigns on behalf of hundreds of people facing deportation. We ran one a couple of years ago, about 37 babies facing deportation to indefinite detention. And by sort of generating these advocacy movements that focus on the human stories, we achieve shifts in public opinion. I think the power of this sort of advocacy is that it changes the question the public are asked to grapple with. For decades, politicians have deliberately made this a debate about borders and national security and sovereignty, but these sorts of advocacy moments make it about people. And at the risk of sounding painfully simple, when we ask a human question, we have got a humane response from the public. So I endorse the focus of these few days on communication, and that response to these advocacy campaigns that we're running has given me some hope and optimism in what is otherwise a very desperate situation in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for kicking that off. Our next speaker is Giussi Nicolini, and she is the former mayor of Lampedusa Illinosa. Now, if it is said that this topic has been used in political football, then this is a heck of a quarterback that you're about to hear from. So during, she was mayor of a town which is the first bit of land when you are coming out of northern Africa. It's the first bit of land that you greet. And she was the mayor of this, and she has had a very fascinating chapter of life around refugee settlement and what comes of that. She has garnered international attention and praise for her defense of refugee rights, and for her efforts, she's received awards from UNESCO, the Council of Europe, and the Olaf Palme Foundation. She's a force of nature, and that extends to her dog. She has a dog that is named Lampa, which is Italian for lightning. Please join me in welcoming to the stage this force of nature, the former mayor, and Jean-Luc, her translator, who's going to help make sure that you are understanding everything that she has to say through her powerful words. Thank you.
Salve, mi dispiace di non parlare la vostra lingua, spero comunque che l'interprete potrà aiutarmi.
Hello everybody.
Io, come avete sentito, vengo da Lampedusa, che è una piccola isola del Mediterraneo, un'isola di appena 20 km quadrati e meno di 6.000 abitanti, è sita proprio al centro del Mediterraneo, tra l'Africa e la Sicilia, cioè l'Europa.
Between Africa and Sicily.
Dunque,
Sicily, Europe.
Lampedusa ha avuto... Sì?
Giussi, we're going to wait 1 minute. We're going to get the sound sorted out so that everyone can hear all of your words. Just give us 1 moment, thank you.
Aspetta,
the translator.
non mi sentono.
Non sentono me, te?
Mm-hmm.
Non sentono te? Ma perché non ti metti qui?
No.
Jean-Luc, how about you come up stage so that you can have an opportunity? We can hear you perhaps a little bit more clearly. Okay, off the top.
Buongiorno a tutti, dicevo mi dispiace di non parlare
again.
la vostra
I'm sorry
lingua.
that I don't speak English.
Vengo da Lampedusa,
I
che
come
è
from
una
Lampedusa.
piccolissima isola del Mediterraneo.
It's a small island
È
in the
un'isola
Mediterranean
di
Sea.
appena 20 km quadrati,
It's only 20
è
meters
molto più
square.
vicina all'Africa che
It's
alla
very close to
Sicilia.
Africa and to
Però
Sicily.
è al centro tra
Is
due
in the middle
continenti.
of the two
Dunque si è
continents.
trovata negli ultimi 20 anni
It's been found in the last 20
anche al
years.
centro della
Has
rotta
been found
migratoria,
in the center of the
la più
migration
lunga, la più pericolosa.
and the more dangerous and long migration routes.
Papa Francesco ha scelto Lampedusa per iniziare il suo viaggio apostolare.
Pope Francis chose Lampedusa as
Perché ha
as
saputo
the
che
first stop
in fondo al mar Mediterraneo
because
negli ultimi
in the
30 anni
in the
sono morte più di
water around the
30.000
island
persone.
they had
Sono numeri di una
30,000
guerra
people dead.
che l'Europa, l'Occidente ha
Is like a
dichiarato
war between
alla
the
povertà,
it's
alla
a
disperazione.
war
Perché
to the poverty.
queste persone non muoiono
These people,
perché
they
il
don't
mare è
die
infuriato.
because of the
Non muoiono per
heavy
colpa
sea.
del mare.
They don't die because
Muoiono
of the
per colpa
sea.
delle nostre frontiere che abbiamo chiuso
Because they die because of
e
the
non c'è nessun modo in questo momento
of
per
the
entrare
barriers that
in
we
Europa,
created.
né
There
per
is
chiedere
no way.
asilo,
There is a difficult
né per
to
lavoro.
find an entrance in Europe to
e
find
anche i
asylum
ricongiungimenti
and
familiari,
work.
la possibilità di ricongiungersi con le famiglie sono molto difficili.
And also it's very difficult
Perché
to join your family
I paesi africani
because the African
sono in
country
guerra,
they
sono senza governo,
they are in
sono-
war, they don't have any
versano
government.
nel caos, nella
There is a
povertà.
big confusion and in
Quello che
poverty.
Lampedusa ha imparato prima di
Lampedusa has
prima di essere
learned
diventata un esempio di accoglienza per il mondo.
before becoming a
imparato.
welcoming
Imparato
island,
da questi viaggi,
has
prima di
learned
tutto le ragioni per cui
has
queste
learned the
persone
reason
affrontano
why
un
those
viaggio che per
people
noi è
are making this
assolutamente
trip
impensabile. Viaggiano su
in condition
barche
that we cannot
che non
even
sono in
imagine,
condizioni di attraversare
on
il mare,
boat that are not
che
able to cross
già
the
dopo poche
sea.
miglia dalla Libia imbarcano acqua.
just a few meters from the Libyan
non lo sapete, ma loro non
land,
muoiono
they are
soltanto
taking water.
annegando.
They die.
Loro muoiono annegando, muoiono per le ustioni
Those-
chimiche
The
provocate
immigrants,
dalla
they will die
combustione
not only
tra
from
l'acqua salata e il
drowning,
carburante che
but
rimboccano
from
nel serbatoio.
exhaustion,
Muoiono perché
from the
rimangono
heat,
asfissiati nelle
from
stile
the
sotto la
smoke
barca.
from the engine of
Muoiono
those
anche
boats,
per omicidi che avvengono sui
and also
barconi
they
da parte
die
degli
for
scafisti che devono alleggerire il peso della barca.
killing act by the
Insomma,
people
io
that organize
vorrei-
those
poi
trips
potremmo
on
parlare
those
anche di
boats.
altro, ma vorrei soprattutto farvi riflettere su questo oggi.
I would like to
Sul
make
fatto
you
che
reflect on
l'Europa in questo momento considera
Europe
i naufragi,
right
le
now,
morti, un modo
considera
per calmierare i flussi.
the death of those people
ha
a
rifiutato
way to
di
change
avere
those
il
migration.
coraggio di governare questi processi che sono naturali.
They
Il Canada è un po' più
refuse to govern
protetto
or
dalla
to
sua
manage
geografia, ma l'Europa
those
è il Mediterraneo.
those trips.
Dunque, e l'Africa è davanti a noi e l'Africa sta male anche perché è stata depauperata e sfruttata dall'Europa.
Africa is
le migrazioni
not
forzate
well,
di questo momento
and
non
those
sono qualcosa
migration they are forced because
improvviso e
the land of
inaspettato, sono
Africa
il
is
risultato
is
di
a
processi
result
di cui l'Europa è
of
stata responsabile.
Europe in
E noi
reality
non
was
possiamo
responsible
che
for
farli
those
morire in mare sia
action
la soluzione. Questa non è la
and
soluzione.
let them die in the sea is not the
Nonostante
solution
in
to
questo
for all
momento gli
those
accordi con la
problems.
Libia con la Libia che come
They
sapete
are
non rispetta i diritti umani, abbiano fatto
relationship
scendere gli arrivi
with the
tantissimo.
Libya
Pensate che in
country.
Italia sono passati da
It
180.000
seems they
a 18.000
made fewer
e in tutta Europa sono passati da 1 milione del 2015 a
migrant towards
48.000 del
Italy.
2018.
They went down.
Mentre gli arrivi sono diminuiti
They
progressivamente,
went down progressively,
la paura, l'odio, la
but
xenofobia,
the
i populismi
hate,
sono cresciuti al punto
xenophoby
che oggi
and
si
populism,
rifiuta persino il
they
soccorso in
grew
mare.
today,
L'Italia, il mio paese,
and
il
they-
paese
and they-
che fino a poco tempo fa
And
aveva
Italy,
salvato l'onore di
that
tutta l'Europa,
up until a
soccorrendo
few
le
months
persone in mare,
ago
in questo
was
momento ha chiuso i
trying to
porti.
do something,
Non solo,
but
ma ha
now,
perseguitato
unfortunately,
le ONG
they close all
che
the
avevano
border
sostituito
and they
l'intervento
persecute everybody that
dell'assenza
gives
delle
an help,
istituzioni, fino al punto adesso è
to
una
the
notizia
point,
di ieri di
like
impedire ad
in
Aquarius,
the
la nave di
news,
MSF,
like for
di
example the
navigare, non solo di
Aquarius,
approdare, ma anche di navigare,
boat
perché barche
that is being not
bandiera
allowed
panamense
even to
hanno
to
costretto il
dock
Panama a
and not
ritirare
even now
l'autorizzazione.
to go at
Anche,
sea.
anche notizia di ieri, il ministro
And
dell'interno
yesterday
Salvini
there
ha
is
emanato
another
un decreto
news
cosiddetto
that the
sicurezza
Prime Minister
che
Salvini
inasprisce
made
i tempi di detenzione dei
that
migranti,
made
abolisce il
that
sistema di
people that have
protezione
been
dei rifugiati
incarcerated
in
to be
Italia,
illegal immigrants,
diminuisce
they made it
le
more
tutele,
difficult
abolisce
to
pure
them
il
to get the
patrocinio
case,
gratuito
and they
per i ricorsi e produrrà soltanto
and
nuovi
all those
clandestini,
new rules,
nuove irregolarità
they're
che
going to make
servirà
more
a far crescere la
clandestine
paura.
and more people with a
Tutto il
lot.
contrario di quello che Lampedusa aveva insegnato
Everything
in questi
so
anni.
far that has
Così
been done
piccola,
now,
ha
it's
salvato la
everything
vita a
that
300.000
Lampedusa
persone.
Island was not trying to do,
Come sapete,
was
io
trying
non
to
sono più
welcome
sindaco
everybody.
perché
As
non
you
sono
know,
stata
I'm
rieletta.
not a mayor
Forse
anymore.
perché
I've not
ho
been
deciso
re-elected,
di essere il sindaco non
probably
solo dei
because I
miei 5.000,
tried
6.000
to be the
concittadini,
mayor
ma
not
anche di
only of
questi
my citizen, but
300
also
nuovi
of all the
300.000 nuovi
of
lampedusani
all the
a cui abbiamo salvato la vita.
300 million people that they came to the island.
Thank you, Giussi. I think if you were to stand for office here in Toronto, you would have a sure for sure. I want to welcome the next speaker. This is Jay Sahak. Now, Ontario, as many of you will realize, is a province where the world has chosen to gather. And in the town of Ajax, which Jay calls home, he's making a contribution as well to the topic of diversity and inclusion. He is the engagement coordinator for that, for the town of Ajax. And he oversees the strengthening of the community and the diversity aspects that make that town home. In addition to his role in Ajax, he's also addicted to school. So he's an adjunct professor at Seneca College, and certainly a big hit with the students that choose that course as well. Welcome to the stage, please, from Ajax, Jay.
Thank you very much. For those of you that are not familiar with the town of Ajax, we're located in Durham region, just east of Toronto. The town of Ajax is actually just east of the city of Pickering. You don't want to go further east than that, trust me. The town of Ajax, I should note that my work at the town of Ajax, I've only been there for about a year and a half. Prior to my work at the town of Ajax, I was at OCASI, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, and I was there for about 9 years. Some of you might be very familiar with OCASI and the work that you do. OCASI is instrumental in advocating for the newcomer sector, for the immigrant refugee sector. And it was at OCASI that I was really honed to some of the issues that I'm now working on at the town of Ajax. Over the next 3 years, as most of you will know, Canada will be welcoming over 1 million newcomers from different streams of immigration. So what does this mean for the municipalities and for my work in particular? There is no way that this is not going to stress the municipalities. So what are they doing about it? How can a municipal local government start to engage in a conversation on the federal level? Well, one of the things that we did at the town of Ajax is I went in front of council June of last year, and I made the case that the town of Ajax declare itself a sanctuary city. Now, sanctuary has been in the news for quite a while under the Trump administration for not so positive reasons. But since we've declared sanctuary at the town of Ajax, we've had some incredible conversations with our residents. And I use the term residents very purposefully. Every municipality in Ontario is guided by the Municipal Act. There's 444 municipalities, with the exception of the City of Toronto, which has the Toronto Act. And in the Municipal Act, the word citizenship only appears twice, and both times it's for voting purposes, purposes that are not relevant to our discussion around inclusion and citizenship. The word resident is what's used, and it is said over and over again that every municipality has a responsibility to its residents. So our sanctuary declaration is just that. It is our way of reaching out to our most vulnerable residents. When you think of sanctuary, when you think of the undocumented, of folks in precarious situations, unfortunately, some people, when they think of sanctuary, they like to attribute it to usually a racialized male that is on the run from the law, and now your municipality is aiding and abetting this individual. That could not be further from the truth. The research that we have done, at OCASI, and OCASI was instrumental in working with a network here called the Sanctuary Network in the City of Toronto, when the City of Toronto declared sanctuary in 2013. And what they found is folks with non-status, these include women in abusive relationships that have their sponsorship agreements broken down. They in turn will have children, some as young as Daniel mentioned, who are not going to school because they don't know about the Ontario Education Act, Section 49.1, which says that anyone under the age of 18 has access to education regardless of immigration status. So we declare sanctuary not because to the direct benefit of our residents. 96% of the town of Ajax are Canadian citizens, not permanent residents, Canadian citizens, 96% of our resident body. So we didn't do it directly for our residents per se. We did it to raise awareness on this particular issue and educate not just our residents, but also the agencies that work within our within our municipality as well, namely our school board, and also the health sector. Non-status folks, people in precarious status, should have access and do have access to healthcare. They have access to Ontario Works. they have access to education, as I mentioned. But this is not always known, including by school administrators. So in my research, and I've been looking at this for over 10 years, which is a little telling because not much has moved in the last 10 years. But when I was doing this research, when I was presenting in New Brunswick, I called pretending to be a parent, and I called 5 different high schools in Toronto, trying to enroll my child. And all 5 high schools asked me for immigration papers, which is a direct violation or contradiction, however you want to look at it, of the Education Act. Now, if I'm a parent and I'm trying to enroll my child, and this is the first point of contact at the school, and so what I'm hearing, I'm not going to be looking for a second opinion and calling different schools. I'm not going to enroll my child in school. And what we found is that a lot of these children, once they reach teenage age, they are involved in precarious work status, they are looking at unsafe work environments, and they're being exploited at work because they can't get meaningful jobs. So I hope to talk to within the panel and with you folks more about what sanctuary means for the town of Ajax, what it's meant for the city of Toronto, and hopefully what it means going forward in terms of what it means for citizenship in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Our next speaker joins us all the way from Mexico City, Javier Lopez Kasserine. He wears many hats in Mexico. He is a strategist, an entrepreneur, an innovator, and he runs a group called Reinventando Mexico. They give advice to private sector, to government, to the third sector on how to use technology to innovate, to address some of those pressing global challenges. In addition to doing that, he is the father of 4 children, and he has a book coming out next month, and we share, it would seem, a love of the Ducati monster in pearl white. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our friend Javier.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, John. Thank you, 6 Degrees, and thank you all for being here. This is a wonderful opportunity for Mexico to present to the world in another point of view, or through another point of view. Let me give you a fun fact about Mexico. How many of the present people have been in Mexico? Can you raise your hand? Oh, that's a wonderful surprise. Well, then you're very aware that Mexico is in distance shorter than traveling from the east to west Canadian coast. And we're part of North America, believe it or not. And why should I say that? Because we share the same problems, the same challenges, but on a completely different scale. We are a population of 120 million. 60 million, which is half of our population, lives in poverty. And poverty, not the way you might be used to. It's a poverty that, when you look at it, it hurts your heart, it crushes your soul. And that's the driver of what just happened in Mexico. We just had an election. I'm part of the left-wing party, and we are planning to change the reality for that half of the population. The only difference between myself and them was the fortune of being born in a family that belonged to the other group. That's it. So what are we going to do? We're going to plan on changing the reality for them so they can have a chance to be free and do whatever they want. And maybe, if luck's on the way, the next generation or the other one would be privileged, a thing that they couldn't do. Our country is very rich. Our country has over 200 spoken indigenous languages. Our official language is Spanish. We have to protect that. We're being inclusive in that matter. We have to be inclusive in our culture. We have to be inclusive of the different Mexicos. Mexico is built out of many Mexicos, as many of you have seen. And trust me, every time that you go, you'll come back with a smile. Because if your poverty is part of our life, you will always get a smile. You would always get a heart. You will always get a handshake. And that's the real Mexico, the one that we want to change to be a better way, a better Mexico. So Inclusion for us is leveling the court, the playing field for them. But we are doing that inclusion not as a goal, but as a way to achieve them. I'll give you some examples that we've done in Mexico City. We did something historical, and that was also fighting against the establishment, which was in the law, in the judicial system, it's marriage in between the same sex. And let me point out, it's not for love, it's for the rightfulness and of the human being to be protected. We also did the environment, and we did the most aggressive green plan to switch the way the people that lived in the city, that we're over 20 million, had to see the city and the actions. We also took care of human rights, and we decided to look up, and now we take care of our elder. We did not use to do that. So you would be in risk after having 65 years or more. Now we have a plan that attends that. And then we looked to the youth, and we gave them scholarships. And then we dropped the percentage of people or students that would just drop studies to go and work and have a living. So, getting back to the subject, I believe innovation is the way to proceed, to change things. If we continue to do the same thing, well, the results are going to be the same. So innovation has to be the way that we have to address these matters. Innovation is the key. Innovation is how we have to invest to address these problems. And I'm not talking innovation only in technology or software development, but on the cultural and social behavior. Innovation in the way to address public policies. Innovation in the way to address our every single day. So thank you, and looking forward to hear from you and give us some advices.
Thank you, Javier. Our final speaker joins us from Greece. Yannis Boutaris is the mayor of Thessaloniki in Greece. He has done quite remarkable things, bringing the history that exists within that part of the world front and center to current day discussion. And that has not been without controversy, which I'm sure he will share with us this morning. He is a very special man who is also fourth-generation wine producer in Greece. So he's very kindly invited me to come. I've booked my ticket, and I look forward to reporting back on how that part of his passion also demonstrates with results. So please join me in welcoming the mayor.
Good morning, everybody. Adrian, John, thank you for inviting me here. It's a very new experience for me, this kind of gathering. Anyway, Sevan said that I'm a fourth-generation winemaker, and this is my profession. I am a mayor, not by profession, but because I wanted to offer more to my community. So let me say some things about my city, and then you understand what's happening today. Thessaloniki is known as a mother of refugees. The first big wave of refugees that came to Thessaloniki was at the end of the 15th century, when more than 50,000 Jews, Sephardic Jews, arrived in Thessaloniki from Spain. So this was the first wave, and in between the end of 15th century up to the 20th century, Thessaloniki was called the Jerusalem of the Balkans. The Jews influenced a lot, and the identity of the city. There was a time when more than 50% of the city was Jewish. Then, at that time, it was the Ottomans who were ruling the area, and the Greeks who were there, I don't know how many centuries. And so the city was 50% Jews, 30% Turks, and another 20% Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, everything. And so this gave Thessaloniki the very, very good identity of a multinational, multicultural city. Beginning of the 20th century, we had more than 12 newspapers in 5 languages in the city, and that was good. And then the catastrophe came. We had in 1922 the exchange of populations between Turkey and Greece. more than 1 million Greeks from Asia Minor came to northern Greece, mainly northern Greece, and many of them in Saloniki. And then we had the Holocaust, and the 300,000 Turks went to Asia Minor. And then we had the wars, and then we had the Holocaust. 95% of the population, of the Jewish population, was led to Auschwitz. So Saloniki was deprived, not only it was the crime of killing people without any reason, it was deprived of its future, because the Jewish community of Saloniki was very, very important. And they were all levels. They were rich Jews, poor Jews, educated Jews, everything. So after the Holocaust and after the war, we had a civil war. And then what conquered the city and Greece, but mainly the city, it was this idea of being a pure race, which is a very, very dangerous way of thinking, being a pure race. And so in the 90s, we had another flood. More than 1 million Albanians came to northern Greece mainly. Now there are around 500,000 living in Greece. In Saloniki only we have more than 70,000 Albanians. They are very well absorbed in the everyday life of the city, and we live very well together with them. And then we had another big flood of Greeks coming from Russia. Greeks from the Soviet Union, the ex-Soviet Union, they came down, and in Saloniki only, more than 500,000 came. In Saloniki only, we have more than 100,000 Greeks coming from Asia Minor. And they are already very well absorbed in the city. And now we have the last flood, which is immigrants either from the Syrian war or from Afghanistan and Pakistan. We have the shame of the islands, Chios, Mytilene, Samos, and other islands, and there are many, many immigrants, refugees, I don't know what, living in bad conditions in these islands. And then, very recently, the last year, we have immigrants from Syrian mainly, who come to the northern border, and they fly through Saloniki. Now, this is just a small prologue, so that you can understand why Saloniki was called the mother of refugees, and why it's easier in Saloniki for all the refugees to be absorbed, let's say, in the everyday community. Now, what we did for that? There are two things that I'm very, very ashamed, being a European. I cannot understand why a group of more than 300 million people, which is the European Union, cannot absorb 5 million refugees from these areas, which are in war. And even if they are not in war, how come they cannot organize a good life for all these people who are desperate? They haven't got any. They feel that if they go to Germany or to Sweden or wherever, their life will be much better, which is not true. Their life is worse. What we try to do in Saloniki, with all the things that we have done, we try to convince them to stay in Greece. We want them for many, many, many reasons. And I will not bother to say to you what things we have done, but we have, first of all, we don't have what we call a plan, a strategic plan, a national strategic plan for the refugees. In Saloniki, Saloniki is a passing through point. They come, they gather, and then through methods which are totally unknown, totally known and totally unknown, they go to the border. The border with Skopje up is not more than 70 kilometers, and they are smuggled through the border, and they go up and up and up through Serbia, up to Germany, or to Sweden, or wherever. And this is a shame too. This is a shame too, because it's what else is but smuggling human beings for 500 euros or 300 euros. It's unbelievable. But this happens, and nobody can stop it, because there is no national plan, There is no European plan. Money is pouring around through NGOs and through things. What we have done, because in Saloniki we don't have camps. We don't have camps, but what we have done, we have we're renting apartments so that they can live there until they get asylum, or they can, but this is not the solution, because what they do after they get the asylum, they disappear. Where they go, how they go, where they live, and how they live. So this is a huge problem. We try with our own goods, having bypasses and with money which come from the European Union or from the United Nations or from wherever. But the biggest problem is there is no strategic plan either in the city or in the country, in the state, which will facilitate the lives of all these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannis. Thank you. So this is the part in the program where they're going to change the stage setup, and I'm going to be joined by each of those 5 extraordinary leaders. Yannis is a very modest man, so he didn't share this in his remarks, but I'm going to share this with you now. A few months ago, after delivering a commemorative event, he was actually assaulted and hospitalized by a group of neo-Nazis who were opposed to his views and principles. And so it is we are especially delighted that he's made a recovery and has been able to be with us this morning. And we commend the principles through which you lead and govern. Thank you, sir. Okay, friends, come on up and join me. Here's how this works, folks. I'm going to ask the first couple of questions, and then I'm going to look from, we've got about 25 minutes total, and I'm going to ask some questions, and you're going to have a chance to ask questions of these leaders from around the world. So don't be shy. Think about what you may want to say, and we'll give you that opportunity for sure. Hi, Jean-Luc. This is cozy.
It is.
This is cozy. I love the 360. Okay, so let's kick it off. One of the threads, the themes that was in everything that all of our speakers touched on was this vitriolic currency of populism. So I'd like to know, and I'm going to start with Daniel on this, what is populism's power chord?
What is its what, sorry?
Power chord. Where is it getting this energy?
That's a very good question, a very important one, and a very difficult one to give a narrow answer to. But I think what we've observed in Australia and indeed in other parts of the world is that there are a range of fears and anxieties that are on the rise. And as public connectedness to political life diminishes, it becomes easier to exploit those fears and anxieties. So the dynamic is fear and anxiety are on the rise, so is the political willingness to exploit it. And I think, anti-immigrant sentiment is a clear example in many countries of that dynamic.
Javier, I want you to hop in on this. When we talk about that rise in sentiment, what can combat that? How do we take on that tidal wave of populism?
Well, for us, it was very important because we've seen for the past almost 100 years that the establishment controlled everything, even the media, even the way we moved, the way that public policies were addressed. And now this movement got enough of the reality that was that we were living, most of the Mexicans were living. And it was corruption what really broke our soul, and because corruption goes with impunity, and impunity, it's something that you feel powerless. And then it came a feeling which wasn't fear, but it was anger, which moved us all to really participate and change our future, being able to change our present, looking towards the future.
So about a year ago, I had the opportunity, I was in New York for a series of meetings and met with some folks from the Clinton Foundation. And we had a discussion about diversity and inclusion. And they were talking about D&I, and I was thinking about diversity and inclusion in the context that we would use it here today. And it was only at the end of the meeting that I realized that the representatives from the Clinton Foundation who were speaking about diversity and inclusion meant Democrats and Republicans. And I remember leaving that meeting and sort of patting ourselves on the back and thinking, well, gosh, we're so much more evolved than that. And then the last year and change has happened in our city and in our region and in our country. And so, Jay, this question comes to you. Is something changing on Canadian soil on this topic? And if so, what is it and why?
Yes, I mean, there's something changing right before our own eyes. In the little road in Quebec, we are now seeing the influx of irregular arrivals. And this is circumventing the Safe Third Country Act, which was not always called into question in Canada. In certain circumstances it was. But this one particular act is now leading the discussion around what direction do we want to take this country in? What policies do we need to revisit? And it is really putting a dent into this image of Canada as a softer country than the United States when it comes to immigration, historically speaking. So there is a change. There is, to kind of touch on the first question of where is this populism coming from? This sense of, we are on a land that is colonized in large swaths, and folks that know the history and now see waves of immigration, they are liking this to a second wave of colonialism, believe it or not. So this is where this movement comes from. Okay, we took this land, this is, and now it's happening to us, so we need to do whatever we can to make sure that this doesn't go any further than it does. So you can understand the problems and the hypocrisy in that feeling. But there is a change, and people are exploiting it in the political arenas. And in my opinion, the absolute best way to combat it is through education and exposure. From the folks that I've talked to that don't agree with me, and those are the best conversations that I have. I find that a lot of this is just ignorance. It's just they're in their own bubble, they're in their own communities, they've been raised within their own family structures. They've lived in communities that they want to live in, and that breeds this lack of ignorance. And all it takes is just exposure and understanding to combat that.
So let's talk about local communities. I'm going to start with Juicy on this, and I'm going to go to our mayor as well, the two mayors. So you had extraordinary success as an elected official, and then at a certain point, the local residents said, wait a minute, my needs aren't being balanced, and the refugees' needs are seeking more of your attention, are getting more of the resources. Can you talk to us a little bit about how politicians can balance the needs of those arriving who need help and those who already call it home?
The situation is more delicate.
Io indico Lampedusa come uno degli esempi in cui intanto abbiamo raggiunto l'obiettivo di combattere l'emergenzialità.
Well, mostly, first of all, we started to combat the emergency because it was like destroying the tourism and the life on the island.
Dall'altro abbiamo proprio potenziato i servizi sanitari
And on the other side, we made the services better for the migrants and also for the local.
e sono serviti per la popolazione residente.
And all those services, we had all those, for example, we didn't have a pediatrician, a gynecologist, 24 hours. And that's the battle that I was trying to do at that time.
Quindi è davvero curiosa la situazione di Lampedusa.
So-
Io credo che lì abbiano inciso di più le dinamiche locali. A Lampedusa io ero più conosciuta come il sindaco della legalità.
Well, because it's different, because I was more considered the mayor of legality than the mayor of the welcoming.
Ma più in generale credo che la questione dei migranti venga strumentalizzata.
And most importantly is the instrumentalization of these migrants, of the migrants.
Una forte manipolazione dell'opinione
There is a
pubblica.
lot of manipulation of the public
Tant'è vero che ci sono
opinion.
degli studi che dimostrano che, per esempio, in Italia i cittadini hanno una percezione sovrastimata.
The study shows that, for example, in Italy, there is a perception blown up of how many migrants or the impact that those many migrants are doing.
Assuefazione, no? Alle immagini del degrado e anche del dolore.
And also,
Io,
like,
per esempio,
we got used to it, to the images that the media was giving to us. We got used to it.
Si è arrivati al punto oggi in cui le persone pensano che le foto dei bambini annegati siano dei bambolotti.
And also, we were so touched by the images at the beginning, and now we think that those pictures on the beach of dead babies, they might be dolls, and they were not real thing. And the politician, to get the power, they're using those images to their own advantage, and it's terrible.
L'immagine dei bambini chiusi in gabbia.
And for example, it happened with the Trump administration, with the picture of the kids in cages. It seems that the level of tolerance has been raised.
It's a very interesting point, Juicy, around, we here in Canada will remember a image of a 3-year-old boy and his body washing up on the shore, and it was quickly thereafter that our federal government jumped to action relating to the Syrian refugee plight. But that concept that we can be so inoculated by graphic images that it kills our humanity in that process is something that I hope we don't see as a major trend that washes here as well. Mayor, can I ask you the same question? How have you, in those 8 years of being mayor, managed to balance the needs of newcomers with the needs of those who are very established in the Greek tradition and have many, many centuries of history that they draw back on?
Well, I can tell you one thing. We didn't manage. We didn't manage. The thing is that in order to manage a thing like that, first of all, you've got to have some money. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And then another very important thing is that we were in the middle. I took over in the middle of a crisis, of an economic crisis, unbearable. The budget of the municipality was cut down 60%. Because the more money we have, it comes from the state. So they cut out the budget on 6%. We had to find ways how we could manage the municipality and not only the newcomers. So we came to agreements with NGOs who have money from Norwegian funds, from the United Nations, from the European Union. And we had also a contract with the United Nations Refugee Secretariat, so that we could give what we thought, we don't want the refugees to go to camps. We want the refugees to be absorbed in the city. So we started this program, it's called REACT program, renting houses, renting apartments, where nowadays there are more than 1,500 families living in these apartments. But this is not a solution. It's a very, very short-sighted solution, because after 8 months, they leave. And there they go. So this is why I'm telling that if there is not a strategic plan, a national strategic plan, and a European strategic plan, because don't forget that we are in the European Union. And don't forget that we are also, in Greece, we are also in a very, very bad crisis. So you come to dead ends, and you can come to find bypasses, how you can overcome these dead ends. We bring in the children of the refugees, and bring them to schools. We open schools, and we have lessons, free lessons. We teach them languages, English or German or Greek. And we also try to find out what are the professions and how they can be used if they can get work. Because if they go to work, we will not need money from outside. I'll tell you an example. Every year in northern Greece, there are more than 20,000 field workers coming from Bulgaria, from Skopje, from Romania, and they come down to Greece, more than 20,000. And I propose to the state that instead of bringing in field workers from these countries, let's occupy these refugees so that they can get money. They leave the money in Greece too. They'll have self-respect, which is very, very important. We must cultivate to them a self-respect that they are not they are in a very bad position, but they can overcome it if we cooperate. Cooperation with them is a very, very essential thing. That's what I think.
Well said. Collaboration, it is the new currency. I'm going to now open it up to the floor. You have an opportunity to ask questions to this panel, this esteemed group of folks from around the world. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and one of our colleagues, hello, and one of our colleagues will come with a microphone and give you a chance to ask. We have Chris right here.
I'm just going to tell people that these are our catch boxes, if those who haven't seen them. If you're going to use it as a microphone, just hold it quite close. There we go.
That is the most awesome looking microphone I've ever seen. I don't know why I didn't get one of those, but I'm jealous.
I'll pass it to you, sir.
Speak into the box, Chris.
I'm talking to the box. Is it like speak to the hand? This has been a great conversation. I wanted to ask a question. I think there's been a lot of focus in this dialogue about social and cultural forces driving some of the issues we see, and I wanted to ask about the economic. We see, I think, certainly in the United States and many other parts of the world, a growing division between rich and poor, and a kind of political abandonment of the notion of a middle class. How much do you think that is driving this nativism and this fear that refugees are going to come in and take the last little bits of my potential prosperity away from me?
Who'd like to take that one from the stage? Yes, Mayor.
I think that this is very, very important. One reason for the populism that exists today, I don't know how it is in the United States. Having a president like Trump is a sign of populism. But the European Union is the same thing. The right-wing parties and far right-wing parties are gaining ground. And this is because they profit. Now, think about it. All this media, the Facebook, all this media, the electronic information, immediately you live all over the world. And then you live in a world which you don't have any way of participating. So populism is very, very the next step. It gives you the right to believe that if you are on the far right and you don't want anything new in your neighborhood, then this will solve the problem. But this also makes people angry. And then somebody gets angry, it's a dangerous thing. If you get angry, you don't want to hear. You don't want to listen to something which is more logic. You understand what I mean? So I think that this crisis will be bigger and bigger. Because, as you said, more people become richer and much, much more people become poorer. This is a huge problem. And the whole problem started after the period of wealth running around, floating around. We have the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, we have the crisis in the States, and it's spread all over the world. The crisis is all over the world. In Greece, all the banks are bankrupt. So what am I going to say? If yesterday I lived with, let's say, 10,000 euros per month, and today I don't have not even 1,000. It's desperate. And if you become desperate, everybody's in trouble.
Our finest moments do not normally come out of desperation, do they? We have another question from the floor. Yes, in the back row there.
This is cool. Hi, so I'm a journalism student, and a lot of us, or some of us here are, as well from Humber. So in America and Canada, there's a ongoing issue with fake news and echo chambers, which just repeat the same narrative of anti-immigration and anti-diversity. So I want to ask if that situation is the same in your respective countries, and what your solution would be to that issue, if that is an ongoing issue in your country.
I wonder, Daniel, if you'll want to take this. You've had great success with some hashtag-driven moments. Let them stay. Bring them here. Hashtag bring them here. How do you respond to that question around the use of social media?
I think with news media, there are two big challenges we've faced in Australia. One is that they're starved of information. So, I mean, there's a lot of places our government could choose to imprison people. It has picked remote corners of remote islands in the territories of other countries for a reason, and that's to keep hidden from view what they know will capture people's hearts and minds. And they've also enacted legislation that means whistleblowers, people who speak out and feed information to journalists, face the risk of 2 years in prison. So the first challenge with generating quality, compelling media coverage is that they're starved of information. The second challenge is that what is normal has changed over time. The abhorrent bipartisanship that I was talking about means that everything awful that could happen has happened. So people dying, children getting sick, government keeping secrets, dodgy things happening, security contractors doing corrupt things, like all of those things that are shocking and newsworthy, they've kind of happened. And so the public invigoration by this issue and by the situation in these camps has kind of died a death by 1,000 cuts over the last few years. And our challenge as advocates is it means it's very hard to generate news media stories now, which means increasingly we do have to rely on other channels for communication, namely social media.
Thank you. And we have time. Oh, yes, we are down to our last couple minutes. We're going to have a quick comment there to add on.
I'll try to answer both of with another point of view. I'm listening to both of three countries right now receiving immigrants. As you must know, Mexico has been part of, it's been the subject and the verb of a hate campaign, a political campaign. And it's about Mexican migrants going to the US and to many other places. Risky thing is that it's not only Mexicans, there are people for the Northern Triangle, which would be Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, well, Central America, which are moving out of their countries, not because they want to. It's because they are scared of the reality. It's poverty, it's a family reunion. And then you would have fear, because really crime is becoming bigger and bigger in these areas. So first of all, I would like to point out that immigrants are not criminals. Immigrants are very brave people that are leaving everything behind, that they put their lives in risk, as we've seen. Mexico gets over 500,000 immigrants every year. Some of them stay in Mexico, and some of them, they use us as a path to get to the United States. It's easy to blame when an economy is failing, to point out to the external, instead of looking that maybe the economical reasons that are provoking that are wrongly. I'll give you an example. I was in a couple of days speaking with someone here in the audience and told me, I just met with the 70 CEOs of your country that decide or can decide to balance the economy of my country. Imagine how dangerous that is. So yes, I agree that middle class, it's disappearing, and we have to fight for it. And but the solution, or pointing out people that come from the outside, which we've proven in the United States economy. We go, we work, we provide, the migrants, the people that go and work, they're good people. Yes, like in every world, there might be an example, but it's working people. And they sum up to the economy, to the local economy, and to the economy of where they come from.
Thank you, Javier. Our last question in the corner here. Thank you.
I just wanted to say one thing quickly, one question, and then the speakers could keep it tight because Adrian has one last word as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jessica. Javier, as you just mentioned, Mexico is seeing a very significant migration from the northern triangle of Central America. I was recently in southern Mexico at a migrant shelter. And Montreal as well, where I live, is also seeing a very significant migration, 400 people crossing every single week this summer. How do you think that we can create a better narrative to show that what is happening in Mexico, what is happening in Montreal, what is happening in the middle, it's all connected. These are often seen as very separate issues. How do you think we can create that narrative of solidarity? Because we are seeing many of the same challenges around integration, inclusion, both Mexico and Canada, and some of these migrants are even the same people, Salvadorans that we're seeing showing up in Montreal.
Yes.
Who would like to take that? How do we make the thread, the connection between all of these? Who'd like that final point? Juicy? Yes. Yes. And as we're doing that translation, I'm going to add, as we think about this topic, most at the 1951 Refugee Convention, the definition does not include climate change refugees. So between now and 2050, we can expect 250 million displaced people due to climate change. So we haven't wrapped our heads around this problem related to political asylum. Wait till climate change takes its way with us. Go ahead.
Capito bene la domanda. Il tema delle migrazioni forzate di questo tempo è un tema che riguarda tutto il sud del mondo.
All those migration, it's about all the South Hemisphere, and also the south of the single state. It's the theme of the poor people that the capitalism has produced. If we have poverty, war, and if we have those major problems, there is going to be always migrant from South America.
C'è una propaganda di tipo populista che dice non li vogliamo perché.
But the problem is that there is this propaganda from this populism way of thinking that we cannot, that says we cannot help them because there are too many. We don't want them here. The populism thinking says to help them in their own country. That means stop selling their weapons to them, or stop using them. The best way to help them in their home is welcoming who's coming. I know mostly the Mediterranean migration, the one that they arrive alive, they start from their territory.
Tra tutti i paesi europei, tra i 10 paesi al mondo che hanno più migranti, il primo paese europeo, la Germania, è al 10° posto.
Okay, well, we have to understand that between the 10 European countries, for example, Germany is the 10th place. So the people that are arriving, they're arriving on the border country. And then we have, for example, the Sudan people, when they come, they arrive to the border of the European country. And then, but these arrive in the southern, but we can't, this populism keeps saying that we cannot welcome them all. We have to understand that it's a very small part, and they tell us that there are a lot, but there are not that many.
Quando vengono a bussare alle nostre porte, ricordiamoci che accoglierli e dargli un lavoro.
When they come to knock to our door, it's to welcome him, and then finding them a job is the best way to help them in their own country. Because whatever the wealth that those new people have, they are making in the new country, they are going to send them back home, and the people back home, they're going to stay, they're going to live a better life.
Thank you so much. We can never forget the impact, the dignity that comes with a paycheck. Thank you, Mayor. Over to you, Ms. Clarkson.
I want to ask Daniel a question because it's relevant to Canada. When we're growing up, we study the Commonwealth countries, and we identify with Australia as being our sister country. We're so like them. We have the heritage of the Magna Carta, British parliamentary democracy, common law, all of that, Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I don't believe you have that, actually. That's right. But anyway, you've answered it to me. But one of the things that's most interesting to me and horrifying is that, like Canada, Australia was built out of people who were losers. People didn't come here rich. People came here because they had nowhere else to go or to make their fortune. And Australia is that in the extreme. The origins are convicts. People who were sent there because they were not wanted. They were taken away from Britain. So I am concerned when I look at Australia having these policies, thinking, how close are we to that? What are the things that we can raise that will not have that? You're saying it's bipartisan. That is, all the political parties believe that that is the right thing to do. To let children, languish, to go and take people from boats that are trying to arrive in Australia and taking them back to where they came from. That is really extreme, and we have not had that publicity about Australia in this country. I just don't know why, because it's absolutely horrifying. And what can we do? Could you have headed it off at the pass at any point? And is the Charter any good in that? Is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms any good?
Yeah, thank you. I think a Charter of Human Rights would make a big difference, because then at least there are some things a government can't do. Whatever the politics of the day, there are some lines a government can't cross. We don't have those lines absent a Bill of Rights. in terms of the difference between Canada and Australia, my theory is that as people, our values aren't that different. What has been different is the politics. As I understand it, in Canada, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there has been a different kind of bipartisanship on most aspects of immigration. Whereas in Australia, since a very closely fought election in 2001, which coincided with the September 11 terrorist attacks, the genie was let out of the bottle. And there are some genies, when they're out of the bottle, they're very hard to put back in. And as a result, this debate about refugees and migration has shifted further and further to the right, such that saying anyone who arrives and seeks asylum should just be treated humanely and having their claims assessed. That is an outlier view now in Australia. And that happens incrementally over time. It happens in the absence of strong political leadership. And it happens, frankly, when civil society takes too long to figure out how to compellingly rebut those poisonous narratives that infect public debate on issues like refugees.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. And if it is true that the genie is out of the bottle, then certainly none of us has the privilege of inaction on this topic. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for traveling so far, including Ajax, to be here with us this morning. Please join me in thanking this extraordinary panel, Daniel, Juicy, Jean-Luc, Jay, Javier, and Giannis. Thank you.
I'd just like to say, before the panelists leave the stage, we'll take a group photo. The photographers are just that away. And for everyone else, we will take a short break. We are truncating our break because we started a little bit late. So our next session, our 360 online offline, will begin here at 11:15. Thank you.